So, are you one of those who's afraid to live long because you're afraid you will not live well? Well, here you go. A conversation with Professor Valter Longo, who's had over 30 years experience in the field of longevity and healthy eating. More than anything else, he actually will give you the tips on how to live well. I'm Dr. Chellam, your host for this podcast, Women Wired for Wellness. In this conversation with Professor Valter Longo, what is very fascinating is this is not about a high fat and a high protein diet. Most of you probably get that information when you surf what we call Google University. However, this is real, true scientific research which shows that carbohydrates are very essential for our well-being. But how you eat it, when you eat it, becomes very important. And if this interests you, this is the conversation you want to listen to. So once again, without any further delay, here's my conversation with Professor Valter Longo. And before I leave you to listen to this conversation, just a quick reminder, download this, share this link with someone else, and like our YouTube channel so we can continue to provide this information for you. Once again, without any delay, go ahead and listen to my conversation with Professor Valter Longo. Everyone, I'm Dr. Chellam, your host for this online show, Resolving Diabetes Naturally. Today, I'm extremely honored and excited to have Professor Valter Longo, who has 30 years of experience in the field of longevity and healthy eating. He's the director of Longevity Institute at the University of Southern California, Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, Los Angeles, and the director of Longevity and Cancer Program at the IFOM, the Italian Foundation for Cancer Research, Institute of Molecular Oncology in Milan, Italy. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Longevity Diet. It's a bestseller, and 2 Italian books. And I'm hoping I will not destroy the way I pronounce it. Is it Alla tavola della longevità, at the table of longevity, and La longevità inizia da bambini. Longevity begins in childhood. Professor Longo is also the scientific director of the Create Cures Foundation and the Valter Longo Foundation. In 2018, Time magazine named Professor Longo as one of the 50 most influential people in healthcare for his research on fasting mimicking diets as a way to improve health and prevent disease. So this is really an honor, Professor Longo. Thank you so much for joining us in this journey.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. So one of the things that I really like to talk to my experts about is their journey that gets them to do what they do. Obviously, I've read your longevity book, and you give a little insight into how you wanted to be a rock star, but then there was an itch, and you wanted to find answers to that, and that's how you got into this longevity research. So tell us a little about your childhood. What got you to this point where this was important?
Yeah. So I think that it was probably, everybody looks at what's most important. And to me, I thought it was very important to play music and to be a guitar player and, to join a rock band. But then I think the more I look at it, and maybe I say in the beginning of the book, certainly being there when my grandfather died when I was 5 or 6 years old, probably in the head of a child, this idea that he would die fairly early, and also probably the observation that other people didn't die. Right? Like the town where my grandfather was from, lots of people made it to 100. In fact, it's one of the towns that's got record longevity. So, I think probably seeing that difference. So why is somebody dying at 70 and other people making it 110? And they're like Salvatore Caruso in Molocchio in southern Italy was a friend of my grandfather, and my grandfather died around 70, and Caruso died 40 years later. Right? So it's really remarkable, right? It's the same lifestyle, generally same lifestyle, So why are they living? So why such a difference? Yeah. So I think it was in my head, and I just thought, I don't know that I can beat studying longevity and aging with anything, including music, including being a rock star. So yeah, I was just waiting for an opportunity to do what I just thought was exceptional. The science and the medicine and just the ability of just studying, having the opportunity to study how to make people live very long and very healthy.
Yeah, and I think that's the second part that I'm really interested in, because I don't think there's a dearth of, compared to the 1950s, people are living long, but they're living faceless, nameless lives in nursing homes and assisted livings. I think the part that is really very interesting is you're talking about living long, but with less disease, which is actually very different than what most people, when you tell them, when I ask my patients, like, when we're talking about longevity, they'll say, I don't want to live long because I don't want to be dependent on anybody. And I don't want to live this life. I have so much pain, or I have, I'm going blind. There are so many things that happen by the time people hit their 60s and 70s. So tell a little about the health and longevity. Why is that we don't have both in America today? What is missing?
Well, you mentioned the nursing homes, but in fact, the problems, I used to think it started in young adults, including myself, right? In the 30s, I was looking at, before I joined in the 20s, while I joined the Roy Walford Lab, who was at the time one of the world experts in nutrition, my blood pressure started rising, my cholesterol was high. Yeah, I was in my late 20s. So I thought that it started there. And now with the third book I wrote, I realized it starts much earlier, right? It starts in children. And potentially it starts in the mother of the child,
Yeah.
The way the mother eats, probably epigenetically, but also environmentally. So now the mother is going to train, it's going to pass down certain genetic modulator to the child, but also the lifestyle. So lifestyle and epigenetic or genetic, which is genetic, epigenetic, and lifestyle. So so we saw, for example, that Italian children, and it's probably the same in the United States, eat 3 to 4 times more proteins than recommended by all the pediatric societies around the world. That's incredible, right? And what was even more incredible is nobody knew this. The pediatrician didn't know this. This was shocking to us. It's like, how could the children be eating 3 to 4 times more proteins than recommended by their own pediatric societies, and nobody knows, right? Yeah, so I think that's a problem. The problem is this disconnect between science and we're seeing it now with COVID-19, but I think it's everywhere. Science and a scientific team that is able to handle the problem and the patient, right? So what we have instead is a lot of noise, whether it's books by people that don't know what to do, journalists that don't know what they're talking about, it's just a lot of confusion and chaos. And people get, from the internet, from Google, from the doctor on TV, and this is what happened with COVID-19. If you want to just take the latest example. So just a lot of opinion, and some of it comes from people, you could say, well, a doctor knows generally about viral infections. No, they do not, right? I don't know about viral infection. I spent decades working on immunology and infectious diseases. We have grants on viruses, on viral infection, but I don't go out and give recommendations, right? So yeah, that's a problem. With nutrition, we've seen 30, 40 years of improvisation. Lots of people, anybody that's got an opinion. Yeah. So you could be an actor, right? You could be an actor.
Yeah.
And we, many cases, right? And you say, okay, I figured it out. So you go on TV and you talk to 10 million people, and you can come up with whatever it is that you want with no consequences and nobody stopping you. And that's a problem, right? Now, what is the solution? Like for COVID-19, I think the solution is to have, panels of people that, the idea is not to sit around forever and be in the university talking about what we're going to do. Now, the idea is like today, right? whether it's COVID-19 or obesity, or, which by the way is contributing to the mortality to COVID-19 or diabetes, is like, what do we do with somebody that is pre-diabetic, right? And not what we do in the lab, right? What do we do so that it works for that person and it makes the person live to 110 healthy, right? That's just completely absent, right? So, and with accountability, right, for us, right? I'm perfectly fine now. We have a clinic. My foundation opened a clinic in Santa Monica. We opened one in Milan, and so we like accountability. We say, look, we know what we're doing, and make us accountable. So come to us, and we'll follow you. We have a biologist, we have a nutritionist, dietitian, physician. They're all working together. They're forced to work together, and so that's now we see that they can do wonders. Why? Because now you have the science, but you don't just have an opinion. You have scientists that say, okay, here are all the papers that say on diabetes, on nutrition and diabetes, and then you have the dietitian can implement it, and you have the physician now that can educate the scientists, but be educated by the scientists. Right? And so that works. And believe it or not, it's completely absent from medicine.
Right. So basically, this is what I tell my patients. It's like, we're getting caught in the marketing noise, and the science gets lost in it, because diabetes, which is what, has been my passion. I come from a family of 9 diabetics, and 4 of them died from complications of diabetes in their late 50s and early 60s. So I see this as a potential, and a lot of people, and like I come from India, so that's like the diabetes, right? It's rising, and it's continuing to be a big problem, especially since it opened up. And I see that here too, when I work with patients, no matter what their condition be, whether it be autoimmune, whether it be hypertension, whether it be cardiovascular, they have underlying insulin resistance. They are resistant to insulin, and they have a lot of the inflammatory markers, the high sensitive C-reactive protein, high insulin levels, and no one ever checks this. When you go to a regular doctor, you just get a fasting blood glucose. If it's under 100, you're said you're normal. And people don't realize they have evolving insulin resistance that is going to surface as diabetes. So for somebody who doesn't understand, like patients who are listening to this, what is the advice that you would give them? Because right now, if I'm sure you're listening to it as much as I am listening to it, and as much as the medical world is confused about it, is we've gone through the paleo AIP diet, we're into the ketogenic diet for reversal of diabetes, right? So we're very confused about nutrition. What has been your research as far as insulin resistance? What really works for people, and what can a diabetic, somebody who's struggling with blood sugars, do right now that will shift their life?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very important to a diabetic person to say, look, for most of you, right, not all of you, but most of you, you can reverse it. Okay? Yes. And because if you already start from thinking, I can never be cured of this, then the motivation goes down, 90%. So for most people, it can be reversed. So of course, if you're on insulin, the pancreas is now past the stage or a point of no return. Yes, that's much, much harder. But we forget that insulin resistance is a good thing in the history of humankind, right? So why were we insulin resistant? Well, most likely, almost for sure, we became insulin resistant during the summer. Why? Because there was plenty of food, there was plenty of fruit, lots of sugar, lots of fructose, and we wanted to accumulate, become fat, essentially, because the winter was coming, and if you're not obese in the summer, you never make it. Right? Yeah. So obese doesn't mean that you were 300 pounds. It means that maybe you had an extra 20 pounds, 30 pounds. Mm-hmm. That's, look at the penguins, look at the grizzly bears, right? So we almost sure about this because we still see it. The penguins, they'll get overweight. The emperor penguins in the South Pole, and then they use that to survive months and months. They can go 4 months with no food. The grizzly bear, same thing. They get overweight in the summer, and then they can make it through the winter. So So if you understand that, then you understand that, okay, insulin resistance is really your friend, only if this is a month, a year, or whatever, right? So, and I'm not suggesting that people go and do a month of that, but I'm just saying it was part of, let's say, in history, it was our friend. Yeah. Now, of course, the fasting period never comes. And so, of course, if you just have the building positive period, insulin resistance builds fat, and then you never consume it, you're in trouble. This is what it's very simple, and this is what's happening all over the world, you know. So what's the solution? Well, the solution has to include some form of fasting, and probably fasting mimicking diet. We abandoned water-only fasting, and the reason for that was because, you know, like all solutions that seem simplistic from the past, they cause as much damage as they cause benefits, right? So we say, let's stick with the fasting mimicking diet. Why? We want to avoid hypotension, hypoglycemia. We want to avoid, you know, people abandoning it because it's too tough, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so the fasting mimicking diet, let's say, you know, 3 times a year to the average person. Now, for diabetes, in Holland, we're testing once a month. 5 days of the prolonged fasting mimicking diet once a month. And then, you know, now we're just recruiting most of the patients in collaboration with Hanno Pale. And we'll see. But, you know, we're very optimistic. Why? Because we used this in the past in 2 trials, and I can only talk about the one that's published, but it worked very well. Everybody, there was almost everyone or everyone that was pre-diabetic moved back. Just after 3 cycles of these 5 days fasting mimicking diet, we know the changes in the diet. Now, is that good? I mean, is that what we're telling people? No, we're telling people you should do both the longevity diet every day and the fasting mimicking diet, you know, once every 3 months, and for a diabetic, maybe once a month until they become not diabetic. But we're also saying, if you can, and only if you can, try to change your diet as much as possible towards this pescatarian, you know, fish twice a week, vegan diet that seems to be very beneficial in addition to the fasting mimicking diet. Now, the diabetic can say, and I have a chapter for diabetes in the book, you can say, well, look, you know, I can only do one or the other. Fine, you know, do what you can. But one is free, the everyday longevity diet. The other one, it costs, I don't know, a couple $100. By the way, I don't make a penny out of any of this, either the book or the diet. So, but I can see that there are, in doing this for decades, I know that there are people in both segments. There are people who say, I will never do 5 days of a fasting mimicking diet. And there's people that say, I will never change my everyday diet to do your, you know, longevity diet, pescatarian longevity diet. So I think that then they just try to get as close as possible to doing both of these, and then, you know, figure out what it is that you can do. For example, can you do it for 5 times a year if you're a diabetic, and then do half for the longevity diet, and that we think it can have tremendous benefits. Well, now we think we have clinical data suggesting that will have tremendous benefits. Because in the latest trial, which I cannot discuss, we had the Mediterranean diet, which is like halfway to the longevity diet, compared to the fasting mimicking diet. Right? So that's a trial we're about to publish, the new trial, and then the diabetes one, the 2 diabetes trials that are going to come up next year. They're going to be published next year. So yeah, that's the way to go. Why is it the way to go? Well, if you're thinking about low carb diet and you're thinking about, you know, very low calorie diet, we think it's a bad idea. Why? Well, the very low calorie diet, number one, most people will eventually stop it and regain all the weight back. And number two, now there's multiple studies on chronic calorie restriction showing the metabolism slow even if you adjust it per body weight. So your body, let's say, weight decreases by 10%, your metabolism might decrease by 15%. So now you're putting yourself in trouble by having this, you know, chronic, you know, first of all, you're not going to be able to do it for very long. And then your metabolism slows so much that you say, no, I can't do this because I got to keep reducing the calories. And then your lean body mass decreases. So your muscle mass will decrease. So you're getting yourself in trouble. With the fasting mimicking diet, we saw very little loss of lean body mass. In fact, there was an increase in relative lean body mass, relative to the body weight. So it looks very promising, because it's just, hey, if nothing else, can you do this 5 days once a month, and that's it. Don't change anything else. If you want to change anything else, change, whatever you want, and try to move towards the longevity diet. But it could be, and by the way, we see this in diabetic patient, pre-diabetic patient. We see this very often, which is, I start, and then I'm on this 5-day completely vegan diet, the prolonged FMD. And then people start realizing it's not so bad to be vegan, or to be close to vegan. So they're not going to become vegan, but they might say, now I'm eating more soups, I'm eating more vegetables, right? Yeah. I'm used to it. Now I'm trained. It's like being trained to do a 10K run. Now you've done it 3-4 times. You can do it on your own. Nobody needs to follow you to go running.
Got it. So let me ask you this, because the viewers, probably a lot of them diabetics, are scared about fasting. What is fasting? If you actually were to define fasting for somebody, what is fasting? Is it because, we tell patients, come fasting for your blood draw. That's not fasting, right? From dinner to breakfast. What is truly fasting that will shift their health?
Yeah, what we tested in the clinical trial is this prolonged fasting mimicking diet. So it's a product that is commercially available, and people, always criticize, because they say, oh, did you have to come up with a product? Of course we had to come up with a product, because medicine is based on products that are extremely expensive. This is very inexpensive.
Yep.
But the drugs are, so the entire medical world is based on extremely expensive and very standardized intervention, right? They go through hell before they are approved by the FDA. And so the idea that we were going to intervene in diabetes or prevention of cardiovascular disease, prevention of diabetes, by just saying, oh, here's what you eat, it was dangerous, as we noticed early on. So because we tried that, right? I tried that in Italy, and it turned out to be a disaster, right? So we started giving recommendation. And of course, what happened is lots of improvisation, and improvisation led people, ending up in the emergency room, ending up in the hospital. A bad idea, right? And then when we moved back and say, that's it, we also had to move back, because doctors were so upset that we were doing this, that I gave the impression that, and what I said in the book was like, look, maybe you could go to a registered dietitian or a doctor, and they can follow you and help you if you cannot afford the diet, can help you. There was disaster, right? Because now we just gave a license to the masses to do their own medicine, be pharmacists and doctors, and make their own soups and things like that. So what's a fasting mimicking diet? What's a 5-day high-fat, low sugar, pretty high complex carbohydrate, all coming from vegetables, and low protein. And that's about 1,100 calories on day 1, and it's about 800 calories on day 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's vegan with these features. And the idea is that we match the effects of water-only fasting on the blood markers, IGF-1, IGF-PP1, glucose, and ketone bodies. So that's why it's a fasting mimicking diet, because it achieves the same or very similar changes to those caused by water-only fasting, but it has the job of preventing hypotension, hypoglycemia, preventing gallstone formation. So it's just it is studied. We haven't demonstrated that it prevents gallstone formation, but it is studied. The high fat content, for example, is expected to be the component that helps prevent the gallstone formation in the gallbladder.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So somebody who wants to follow the longevity diet, because, before they buy a product and they say, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 days of a month, and for the next 3 months, I will do it. If they were to understand how, for people to get into this diet, because it's a sudden decrease in calories, most people consume, if you actually practically speaking, 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day. They don't realize that, but that's what they're consuming.
Yeah.
What would be the best way for them to get into a fasting mode? Like, is there a specific meal that they should end with their day, like their dinner? Is there a specific combination that you would say this is good? So, the next day, if you want to start fasting, that would be helpful. Is there something that, like for me as a physician, if I want to conduct a workshop, what kind of diet should I be advising to people?
Yeah, so I think, what I describe in the book, the everyday diet, the longevity diet. I would try to get as close as possible, again, to a vegan, pescatarian, so fish only 2 meals a week.
Okay.
Try to be salmon and anchovies, sardines, et cetera, et cetera. So you also get the omega-3s and some of the vitamins. And then eat within 12 hours, right? So that's another very good training. I disagree with some of my colleagues that go to 16 hours, although I think that can be beneficial for a short period. Let's say that you're diabetic, you want to do, let's say, a month of 16 hours, 16 hours of fasting, hours of feeding. I think it's okay. I wouldn't go past that, and there's some risk of gallstone formation. But I think the best is 12 hours. It's 12 hours, you have very little, and don't skip breakfast. Keep the breakfast, do 12 hours. So you do breakfast 7 a.m., be done by 7 p.m. You want to eat at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., start at 9 a.m., and then keep it like that. I also recommend in the book, and we're about to start a clinical trial looking at that, is meal frequency. So we realize in the decades of research that we got to keep it simple for people. So the one of the things we're saying is just go breakfast plus 1 meal and 1 snack. And we don't touch your breakfast, we don't touch your meal, we just touch your snack, and that snack is got to be about between 250 and 300 calories, and it's got to be low sugar and low starch snack. And that's it, We don't tell you what to eat. We just tell you that you can only have breakfast, eat within 12 hours, have breakfast, have 1 major meal, and then the third meal, replace it with a 250, 300 calorie vegan snack, low sugar, low starch. That's it. So so we're testing that, and but I think that I do it. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I had lots of people do it, and it works very well. So basically, as you start gaining weight, I immediately switch to skip lunch. Like today, I won't have lunch, and I just have a coffee, sort of like a tall coffee, and that's my lunch. And then and then I'll have normal dinner. I had normal breakfast, normal dinner, and then I'm also gonna have an additional snack in my case because I don't have a weight problem in the afternoon. But so that's certainly a very good way to controlling the meal frequency. Now I usually do this only for, let's say, a month, and then my weight goes back to normal, it's stabilized, and now I go back to 3 meals a day plus a snack.
Got it. So do you see a difference between men and women?
We're not seeing that. In the clinical trials, we're not seeing it. We've done it both for normal people, with cancer people, hormone therapy, say prostate cancer hormone therapy, and breast cancer hormone therapy, which usually causes an increase in weight. And lots of metabolic issues. And they respond, both of them responded very well, the male and the female in all trials. So now we have, I don't know, maybe 10 trials that have been completed, and we did not see. Now we saw some of the people that really have a hard time completing we see some of the young overweight women.
Okay.
That's where we see sometimes they just cannot make it to the end of it, But we're talking about out of 100 people, 2 like that,
Right. But a good portion.
Of course, there were not 100 young women overweight. It was out of 100 people, there were maybe, say, 10 in that category, and 2 out of 10 could not complete the fasting making diet.
Yeah, because for us in the clinic, that's not how we get, right? Majority of our patients would be overweight young women who are trying to lose weight. And that's been the biggest challenge I've seen, is getting them to shift their evening meal. Breakfast, they will do good. Lunch, they will do good. The evening meal, somehow, I don't know whether it's the leptin resistance or insulin resistance, they just get to eat all the way to bedtime. And that's where the tipping happens, and the fasting really gets broken down. And even with the fasting,
I don't understand. What do you mean?
So if you're telling them 12 hours, let's say I start with 12 hours, I tell them to do a good breakfast and a heavier lunch, but a lighter, like eat dinner like a pauper. That they can't, and they'll start snacking all the way towards the night because they're truly hungry. They're struggling with that.
Yeah, so I think that the solution, at least to some, you're never going to get solution to everybody. Is when they're young, is to turn it around. Like, in my case, I will never skip the dinner. I have a fairly big dinner. And, I have a dinner that is typically about 70 grams of, let's say, pasta. And then I have maybe like 400 grams of legumes and vegetables. It's big, right? But it's not big in calorie. Now this is the type of stuff we're starting to study. Mechanically, it's probably telling the stomach, I am full, no room for anything, forget it until tomorrow. I mean, no way I'm eating again. See, that's so the light meal in some way, especially now, if you're 80 years old, I will agree with that. In fact, a lot of 80-year-olds do that, and that's great. But if you're 25, I would turn around and say, go ahead and have the big meal at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and make it big like this, and make a relatively low starch, but large volume, lots of, and by the way, I put lots of olive oil on it too, in addition to this. And because that's going to be self-regulatory. And I think to a young person is very important, because if by 10 o'clock they're hungry, you got a problem, and it's going to be extremely difficult for them, no matter what the rule is, to obey it. Especially because in the United States, they eat early. They might have the dinner at 6:30.
Yeah.
Then from 6:30, making it to 11:30, midnight. So I would say, hey, eat a little bit later, maybe eat around 8, and turn your meal the way I describe it in the book, larger, and then just get rid of lunch. Or have a healthy snack for lunch that might provide whatever it is that you're not getting for the rest of the day. Then once you get to 75 and having a big dinner, it causes you, reflux and problems. And then of course, then you don't have a choice. Then you have to, or you're not sleeping or whatever. But usually, this is what centenarians have done all their lives. They eat late, and they eat like this, whether they're in Okinawa. Okinawa is a little bit less, but certainly the Italians, the Greeks, the Loma Linda people, they eat a lot, and they don't have sleeping problems. So in general, so I think it's not something that will negatively affect sleep in most people.
A lot of it is also just change in habits, and I liked what you said about the volume, because that mechanically that actually keeps you well. And the other part of it is the when you say low carb, when you look at it, beans and pasta come under carbs, so do vegetables. But that's not the carb you're talking about, right? You're talking about refined carbs.
Yeah, I was saying that the mistake that, let's say, the Italians, but Italian cuisine now is probably number one in the world, right? So this is made all over, and it doesn't have to be bread, pasta. It could be bread, it could be rice, So the mistake that a lot of the restaurants make, and is to have these empty dishes of starches, right? So in Italy, for example, we saw the children were eating an average a pound, I think, a day of starches, right? So a huge amount, right? And this is the same is happening in the United States and all over the world. So the meal then should have about 70 grams of pasta, rice, so 2 ounces. Why is that important? Well, I think it's important because if you remove the pleasure out of the dish, it's just a matter of time before people are going to reject it. And but if you have the rice and you have the pasta and you have the bread, but it's just 70 grams, it's not bad. I do it almost every day, every night. So it's not bad. You still, psychologically recognize that you're eating what you've always eaten, what you like. And then, you start appreciating, as I was saying earlier, the legumes, and the vegetables, which have carbohydrates, but very little of it, right? So you now have 1 pound of food with adding very little carbohydrate compared to what you would do if you had this empty dish of pasta and
Yes.
nothing else. What you typically see in most restaurants, or rice, the bowl of rice, we just gotta eliminate this idea of a bowl of rice, a dish of pasta. It should always be a minority on the plate. The starches should never represent the majority of the plate.
So the same thing about the protein too, right? That was very important. What I've noticed is when patients come to me on a high protein diet, I can't get the insulin down. The insulin is quite high. The sugar is very high. But the message diabetics get is eat protein because it fills you and your sugar gets under control. So if you could just speak to that too, so people get that message.
Yeah, this is the absence of the biologist, the molecular biologist in medicine, right? It's tragic, because what happens is that protein and certain amino acids are controlling growth hormone, which is controlling insulin and IGF-1. So, for example, in the people that we follow that are growth hormone receptor deficient, either the mice or the people, insulin is very low, IGF-1 is very low, and TOR is very low, right? So now, and insulin resistance doesn't occur in spite of obesity, right? So we're seeing that the connection between obesity and insulin resistance is the growth hormone IGF-1 TOR insulin axis. So but if you reduce your protein, now the TOR, IGF-1, and insulin go down, and now you're unlocking all these problems, and you are now you're going to facilitate insulin sensitivity. Now, of course, you don't want to become protein deficient, because then you go from one problem to the other, and you may reverse insulin resistance and now start, negatively affecting your immune system, for example, and so you don't want that. But I think if you stick with 0.35 grams of proteins per pound of body weight, so if you weigh 100 pounds, it should be 35 grams or so of proteins. Now watch out, because the vegan diets tend to have lots of legumes, for example, have low methionine, which is fine, but you don't want to exaggerate, because you could have problems. We're about to publish on that very soon, but you could have problems by just this is why they fish twice a week. Because lots of people don't realize that that the vegan diet can be great and can be problematic at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a lot of holes unless you're following a very high vegetable, and most vegans not necessarily do that. What I've noticed is they eat the processed soy or the grains is probably their mode, because it's very filling. And like you said, pleasure of eating comes from the grains, not so much unless you know how to cook the vegetables. So if somebody's hearing this, what I'm getting from you is having a lot of vegetables, which is what even your fasting mimicking diet is, mostly fat and carbs, but more of the vegetable-based carbs, some protein. And the way they would do, even in the longevity diet, is lots of fiber, just enough protein, and good quality fats. And making sure that you're doing 2 meals a day. If you can do it 12 hours apart, that'll probably be helpful. With a small snack, 230 to 300 calories is probably useful. And in terms of, somebody who's watching this and who's been talking about fats, carbs, and protein, do we really need to talk about those? Can we just say have this many vegetables, and your source of protein can be from legumes or fish, and fat can be from good quality oils or olives or avocado? Is that another way?
Nuts, almonds, hazelnuts, walnuts. So salmon, avocado is fine. Olive oil. No, we do need to talk about proteins. People need to pay attention, because again, you need almost 300-400 grams of wet, let's say, chickpeas to get 30 grams of proteins. So, if you're somebody who weighs, 150 pounds, you probably need, let's say 60 grams of protein. and you know,
if you want to maintain your weight or just to rebuild your muscle?
To maintain a normal lean body mass, right? So you might need 60 grams a day of proteins, and especially if you're vegan, because, you know, of the low methionine and some of them low leucine, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so then, you know, 60 grams, you're going to need to pay attention, because most people are not going to get that. Especially women, I see that the majority of them that are vegan or close to vegan, they're probably malnourished. Because you really need to say, hey, I just got 27 grams from these chickpeas. Where am I going to get the other 20?
Yeah.
Right? Well, you know, if you're vegan, not easy, right? You know, unless you got a supplement, and now if you're pescatarian, much easier, because now on those 2 days a week, you might get 100 grams of proteins from the fish. And so that and there's a lot of methionine, a lot of leucine, and so those amino acids may carry you for the rest of the week. But if you don't even do that, you're going to be in trouble probably at some point.
Yeah. And what about when you guys studied for diabetics, did you ever include eggs in them?
Yeah, eggs is fine. I think I recommend a couple a week. That's probably fine, unless you're very sensitive to the cholesterol in the eggs. And some people are, some people aren't. Some people can eat lots of eggs and nothing happens. Yes. But yeah, if your cholesterol is normal and you eat a couple of eggs a week, I think it's a good, very good nourishment source. And so you could alternate, say, every other day, either one egg or fish.
Got it. So somebody who's listening to us, if they are a diabetic, what would you tell them to do as the first step to take in the direction of reversing, if possible, resolving their diabetes?
Yeah, read the book. Unfortunately, the third book is even better for diabetics, because it has a real manual on here's how you handle it. For example, weight, right? And we spend a lot of time for the third book working with pediatricians and with physicians, you know, in trying to understand. For example, lots of doctors hear about, oh, if you weigh yourself, that's a problem. It's a stigma. Then we looked into the data and the clinical trials, and it didn't look like that at all, right? It looked, in fact, like it was a very effective. It was a very effective method to control your weight. But the people that weighed themselves a lot did poorly, because they were probably the ones that were more concerned with the weight. It was not the other way around. It was not that the weighting all the time contributed to overeating. It was that the overeating made you, a lot of people,
go back and check weight,
use the scale all the time, right? Yeah. So the method, I think, has to be very, very, disciplined. And so, as it is for me, it's always been for me, like everybody, you know, my mom has always been overweight. And so I grew up in the family, you know, always aware that it was just a matter of time. And most of my family members are overweight. So I grew up thinking it's just a matter of time before it's going to hit me. And so I use always this sort of military system, right? Which is very straightforward. I mean, it doesn't really it takes 10 seconds. But the 10 seconds, like, weigh yourself every other day. Don't make it too obsessive. And if you're normal weight, weigh yourself once a month.
Okay.
But once you start getting in the danger zone, then do it every other day. And then tweak the starches for, so adopt a pescatarian vegan diet, pescatarian, twice a week fish plus fish, all the other things that we said. And then use the small changes in the starches to make up for the failure to go one way or another, right? So, for example, if you do all of these things and you're, let's say, 25 pounds overweight and it's not working, then you have to look in your day where the starches are: the pasta, the bread, the rice, the sugars, the simple sugar, the Coke, whatever it is. Look at the starches or the sugars and then say which one can I get rid of, right? And you know, so in children, for example, we noticed that they were giving you know, a pound a day of these starches, including potatoes and things like that. Then we did a survey, and we realized a lot of children probably didn't need to eat potatoes. You know, they were fine with it, but it wasn't like if you took away, you know, it would be a big problem. So then we talked about, you know, can you reduce 30 or 40 grams a day? That's it, you know. So like 1 ounce to 2 ounces a day of these starches. Don't touch anything else.
Yeah.
And this is enough. But the plan doesn't need to be a plan like everybody's obsessed. Oh, tomorrow I have to get there. Use the fasting mimicking diet to get you excited, right? Because you lose a lot of weight very rapidly.
Yeah.
Right? And then you get excited. But then go back to your normal diet and plan on this small tweaking. Like, okay, it's not working. I've been doing it for a month. So for example, in my case, I have at night with my pasta, the dish that I described earlier, I have bread, right? And if I start gaining weight, I just remove that bread.
Right.
And you know, that's it. There's just a little piece of bread that I have normally. I remove it. Then, you know, eventually I go back to it. So it's these little things that allow you to say, this is a diet that I enjoy. I can do this for the rest of my life. I don't even feel like I'm on a diet. I'm eating a lot, right? I'm eating more than before. I'm still eating the pasta, the rice, the bread. You know, yeah, I just happen to eat. I look at all the things, like it could be fruit juices. Another thing, you know, Italian children were drinking a ton of fruit juices. And you know, in most cases, they probably don't even care. You know, if it wasn't the mothers or the fathers that gave it to them, they would probably say, I'm okay, completely the same, you know, having it or not. You know, so you say, don't have it then. It's okay. Just have a couple of fruits a day, and then, you know, lots of vegetables. You don't need a fruit juice.
Got it. So very, very subtle changes and being disciplined but enjoying. I mean, really, the message is like go to what
eat a lot, and then obey all those rules, which are not really rules that take you that far away. What you've always done, 12 hours. I mean, most people eat within 14, 15 hours. So 12 hours is not revolutionizing your day. It's just a matter of, for example, people say, well, but I get up at 6. What do I do? That's okay. Don't eat, you know. If you have dinner at 8, eat. Wait until get up at 6, do whatever you got to do, and have breakfast at 8. You know, this is what I do. Right? Again, I do my exercise, whatever, showers, etc. before, and then start breakfast within the 12 hours. You know, very straightforward. You know, once you do it for a little bit, it's really you don't even feel like you're doing anything that is a burden. And that's exactly the point, right? Get to the point where almost none of this is a burden.
It's mindless. It's mindless and it's easy to do.
But it won't be for the first month, right?
Yes.
So whatever change you make, you just say stick with 1 or 2 months. You're gonna suffer a little bit if you, let's say, go to 2 meals a day plus a snack. If you're, let's say, 100 pounds overweight, you do 2 meals a day plus a snack. Yes, you're gonna suffer for 1 or 2 months, and then after 2 months that you skip lunch, for example, and you have coffee for lunch, you're gonna say, I'm perfectly fine. Why? Because your entire system is now wired to not have lunch. So you're not gonna have spikes of insulin, et cetera, and signals to you from your brain that this is the time where you normally eat. You know? But that signal is gonna last probably about a month, and then it's gonna go away.
Yeah. So in the morning, if you're just breaking your fast, is coffee is that breaking your fast, or is that okay?
No, okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. So study after study, including our own. Then we were scooped by a Chinese group that published that before we did. But you know, we were looking at in Haynes database, and you can pick up. It's a paper in JACS, that's the 4th or 5th. Paper showing that if you skip breakfast, you tend to live shorter, have more cardiovascular disease. You may also have more complication from diabetes. So yeah, there should be, I think, about 300 or 400 calories minimum, and whatever it is that your breakfast is. You know, so again, I think it's also important to minimize the rules to as much as possible, right? So Yeah, so have breakfast and then use either the lunch or dinner as your target elimination meal, you know.
So what is a good longevity breakfast?
Well, you know, a good longevity breakfast could be, you know, some fruit with some whole bread or you know, some whole grains, and yeah, so, and coffee or tea. That's a good longevity breakfast. Now I have an okay longevity breakfast, you know, so I have tea, and then I have just bread, raisin bread, right? So not the best, but I always thought, you know, again, it's the idea of not of enjoying it, and you know, so once in a while I do a self experiment. I take a continuous glucose monitor, and I you know, I look at how this affects me, and of course there's an insulin spike, but my insulin level are so low normally, and my HbA1c is so low that I can afford it. Now, if I started gaining weight and become more insulin resistant, maybe I couldn't afford that breakfast anymore, and I will have to go to like eating some nuts and eating some whole grains, and maybe say a yogurt could be good, and also it's people specific, right? Some people, if you have too much starches in the morning, you might have a low glucose, you know, a spike of insulin, and then a very low glucose phase. So you have to see, and that person might have to go to yogurt and whole grains, no matter what, because they may get you know, too low levels of glycemia, of glucose,
sugar
in the blood. You know? So I think that. But yeah, if you go to the longevity diet, the problem we see is insulin sensitivity. It's remarkable, right? The biggest problem we have when people use it is the insulin sensitivity. Even those that used to have insulin resistance, now they're insulin sensitive, and they get low blood glucose level.
Got it. Yeah, this has been very interesting, this whole conversation. I think they'll get more out of this conversation than from any nutritionist that they ever get to see, because of the misinformation and confusion that's there. That's really why I wanted to have you on, and I really appreciate all of the information. Is there any question that you wish that I asked you but I didn't ask you?
No, I think you were pretty thorough. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Longo. I do appreciate you coming on with Resolving Diabetes Naturally. Appreciate it.
Thank you.